If he would have gotten in his car and driven real fast and went up a telephone pole, I'd have understood it, but I don't understand the bridge. I just don't understand it.
And that's, that same week he threatened suicide. And it was the first time ever he had threatened it. He threatened it by jumping off of the Sunshine Skyway Bridge.
And, everybody's got a breaking point. They just simply don't realize it.
And I remember specifically looking at the clock because he was supposed to be to work at 8. Or actually 9. He was supposed to be to work at 9. And I picked up the phone to call him at 6:30, and I said, you know what, it's kind of early. Let me wait an hour or so because he's probably tired. He needed the sleep. So I waited till 7:30 and called my brother. And my brother actually jumped off the bridge at 7.
What really takes place is you get in this kind of tunnel vision and you can't get out of it. I kind of woke up pretty quick when I hit the water.
And I actually found out he had been driving over that bridge several times that day, contemplating pulling over and jumping. I didn't go back. And now I have to live with this. I have to live with it. I have to live with the pain of losing my brother. He had 3 beautiful children. They have to live without him.
If anybody realized before they jumped how much it was going to hurt, they wouldn't jump.
The pain comes and goes. Some days it's worse.
Became obsessed with that bridge and threatened it again in October of 2008. And he did it, October 18th. He, I don't even know how long he was at the bridge. I do know that he went over the bridge northbound and coming back southbound. He text messaged his wife at 6 a.m. Apparently waited an hour for her to respond, did not get a response, and pulled over at 7 a.m. and jumped.
The Skyway Bridge has a daunting past. Starting in 1980, where 33 people lost their lives.
Mayday, 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 Coast Guard. Mayday, 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 Coast Guard.
Vessel calling, mayday, vessel in distress. This is United States Coast Guard, St. Petersburg, Florida. Request your position, nature of distress, and number of persons on board, over.
This is it. All the emergency equipment out to the Skyway Bridge. The vessel just hit the Skyway Bridge. The Skyway Bridge is down. Get all emergency equipment out to the Skyway Bridge. The Skyway Bridge is down. There's a mayday, emergency situation. Stop the traffic on that Skyway Bridge.
This is Coast Guard, St. Petersburg. Roger, what size is the vessel that hit the bridge, over?
The large vessel. Stop the traffic on the Skyway Bridge. There's some people in the water. Get emergency equipment out to the Skyway Bridge now.
This is Coast Guard, St. Petersburg. Roger, what vessel are you on, over?
Some adventure
Adventure, Coast Guard, St. Petersburg. Roger, what is the size of your vessel and can you assist? Over.
Cannot assist. We're 606 feet long, light draft. We cannot assist. We are in on apartments. Stop all the traffic on the bridge. Send some vessels out here to render assistance. People are on fire.
This is Coast Guard, St. Petersburg. Roger.
This is Bob Height reporting live from the Sunshine Skyway. For the second time this year, the scene of a terrible disaster. Today's claiming 31 lives when the freighter Summit Venture smashed into the southbound lane of the Skyway Bridge, collapsing 1,300 feet of the structure into the bay. Now here's Frank Migliore with a report on what is the worst accident in Bay Area history.
Divers began to pull bodies from the water about an hour after the crash. By late afternoon, the confirmed dead reached 18. Coast Guard officials believe there are perhaps another dozen people in the water. Many of those people were passengers on a Miami-bound Greyhound bus. Trooper Leroy McIntosh, first officer on the scene.
I could see a couple of people in the water. I could also see that there was a bus in the water, but I couldn't see any vehicles in the water at all. I was advised by one of the drivers, which was behind the bus, that there was possibly 2 or 3 cars in the water.
Yeah. What could you see of the bus?
I could see the side of the bus, and I could also see that the door was open on the driver's side, but I couldn't see any people in the bus at all. I could see clothing, which was floating around in the water.
A boat trying to come through in weather conditions as
His
they were
car
today
skidded to a halt just 2 feet short of plunging 140 feet into the water below.
We all bailed out of the car and went back up to stop the other cars waving, and we got all the other cars stopped.
What were your thoughts when you saw what had happened and you finally came to a stop?
I figured the Lord was real good to the 4 of us.
Eyewitnesses say the Summit Venture was inbound in a driving rain this morning when it struck the span. It was not even close to where it might have made safe passage into Tampa Bay. Huge sections of the center span's steel grating lay on the Venture's bow like lost pieces from a giant erector set. There is only one reported injury on board. Tugboats were quickly on the scene. They moved the Summit Venture about a quarter-mile south, and it spent most of the afternoon anchored just about the spot that the Blackthorn went down in late January. What remains of the span hangs precariously. Transportation officials have declared the entire structure unsafe, and once again, Tampa Bay is closed to commercial shipping. At the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, I'm Frank Migliore, Newswatch 8.
I used to live in a place where every day I looked out at that bridge, every single day. And it's pretty amazing. It's a pretty amazing sight. And I think I can understand its magnetism. I think that final moment of standing up there, and usually there's no final moment, you know? People aren't standing there looking around because they've made their decision by the time they get there. The reality is they just climb over and jump.
I don't know, I just look at that bridge and I go, I couldn't do it. I mean, you really have to be severely depressed or mentally ill, something, to jump off that bridge.
I think that people get obsessed with the bridge. I think you see it in the mainstream media, you see it out there, people doing it, and I think there's some people that just honestly get obsessed by the bridge and jumping from it. Yeah. And that's the way they want to end, or they're trying to leave a legacy. I'm not sure. It's hard to tell what's going through their minds. You know, especially on our end, we don't know. All we do is we pick up.
Yeah, we're dealing with the aftermath of it.
I think that the Skyway, there's just something about bridges that have always been an attraction for people to jump off, whether it's the Skyway or the San Francisco Bridge or overpasses. We have people who jump off overpasses, they jump off into the rocks. Jumping seems to be a fairly common, methodology, and it just looks like, if you jump, what's the possibility you're going to survive that? And, I think that too, it's there And when you're in that state, when you're in that suicide state, you're just looking for a place. And that just, to me, would be a gravitation point. And I think that's why people jump, because they're in that state of mind. And when you're in that state of mind, you lose all perspective. All you can see is your pain.
Matt always said, the purpose of life is a life with a purpose. I don't know what purpose was served by jumping off a bridge. He had a life. We all did. Life has changed tremendously. Nothing's the same. Nothing ever will be the same. Whether it's a child or a spouse or a friend, it changes your life. It changes the way you look at life, the way you feel, and the way you remember.
And, you know, looking back on it, it's like, like I say, it seems almost so long ago, it was like a dream.
When you commit suicide, there is something wrong, and that's what people need to address. Not that it's a selfish act, not, you know, how dare them do this to their loved ones. We need to address what causes people to get to that point and find out how we can help them before that point.
The Crisis Center provides a broad myriad of different services to men, women, and children in our community who are the victims of life's problems. Some of those are small, and some of those are very large. And so we provide a regimen of counseling services, of intervention services, even medical services that helps people to overcome crisis that they encounter in their lives.
Well, it is interesting that our crisis hotline workers sit in a room looking out at the Skyway Bridge as if being constantly reminded of what the potential for human despair is. There's not a minute that any of them are on the phones that they don't see what that potential is. And when you look at that bridge every single day, it's very easy to think about what it would be like to see your life as so meaningless, as so painful, that climbing up to the top and throwing yourself off would feel like a release. It makes me really sad, but I understand it. And I wonder if maybe more people than not understand it, and that's why it's so iconic. When the bridge phone rings, it's a very specific ring. Anybody in the program can pick it up, although the new people tend to look at it with terror. After a while, everybody's used to it. You put down whatever you've got, whatever you're doing, and you pick that phone up. And sometimes it's someone anticlimactic, sometimes it's somebody with car problems, but occasionally it's not. Sometimes it's that last connection that somebody's looking for. And so at that moment, you are faced with having to hold on until the Florida Highway Patrol gets there. And they're pretty quick. I mean, we're talking a few minutes, but that's a long few minutes. But if it works, if you manage to make that connection, if you can hold on for those few minutes, it is amazing. It is what we're there for.
It is. As morbid as it might sound, it is, you want to know every last detail, good or bad. And I wish that I could find who found my brother, and that I could tell them, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you had to be part of this, because I can't imagine finding a body in that, you know, in that condition, floating in the water. And You know, I go boating with my 2 sons. I can't imagine. And I just, you know, like for me, it's important to let that person know that my brother didn't think of that, because I think if my brother would have thought of that, maybe he wouldn't have done that. And maybe that's something that I should have said to my brother. You know, what about, you know, if you jump, what about the person that's going to find you? You know, what are you going to put their lives through?
Well, the first thing that happens is when we initially receive the call of a jumper from the Skyway, the first thing we do is get on the phone. We notify the dive team, and at the same time we notify aviation, and we get aviation to fly out and do a flyover to see if they can locate anybody in the water, because they're the fastest to get out here and respond. As you've seen, that it's a significant time travel for us to get out here from our office. We also notify the dive team, which is Scott Jones's area of expertise. He's a diver on the Sheriff's Office dive team. He's also the assistant dive team leader. And then he starts to corral the troops that he needs in order to come out here and safely execute a dive in the event that we need to search for a body.
And then what we do as divers, we get the divers together, usually meet at the Marine office, load up in the boat with all dive gear, and take the trip out here with the Marine unit. And once we get out here, usually start a search pattern, see if we can locate a general area. And then the Marine unit deploys the divers. Usually we'll deploy from the boat, because as you can see out here, there's really nowhere that you can actually pull a boat to. Deploy from the boat, do our operation, and when we locate the victim, generally bag the victim in the water, and then have to get the victim back to the boat, load them in the boat, get the divers safely back into the vessel as well, and then start our trek back to our office, where the Sheriff's Office detectives usually come out with the medical examiner and do their job with the victim.
We're well aware that the whole time that we're doing this, there's things that go through your mind. It's like, does this person have a kid at school? Somebody making their way to the school to pull them out of the class and say, hey, your mom or your dad's not coming home today because they jumped off the bridge. So no matter how bad we have it, we think of them, and they have it a lot worse than we do. And at the same time, while we're out here searching for a body, we're also well aware that there's a whole family somewhere sitting in their living room, chomping at the bit, wondering, they found him yet? They found him yet? They found him yet? And telling, you don't want to tell people, well, the weather's bad, so we stopped searching for your loved one. That doesn't go over very well with people.
Of course, if the body surfaces and a civilian's out fishing and they do come across the body, we usually don't tell them to recover it. We tell them to stand by at a distance, because, like I said, the devastation that occurs when somebody hits the water from that height and that speed, you really don't want the trauma effect on that civilian. Tell them to stand by, keep an eye on the body, but keep it a safe distance. And then we respond. We usually we get a coordinate from them where they're at. We'll respond, and then we do our job. We bag the body in the water usually. Depending on the circumstances, we'll bag them in the water and then get them on the boat, and as safely as we can, get them on the boat and then get them back to our office. But as far as the civilian, we really try to limit their exposure to the body, just because of the effects it might have on somebody.
I don't know. I've heard that installing nets on the Skyway is not possible. I don't know why structurally. I think they've said that it's not possible. I do know one thing. I know that they had cops patrolling and I don't know whether they did it 24 hours a day or if it was randomly. But I do know that they saved, I think, like 42 lives in a matter of 3 years or something. And I might have those completely wrong, but I know that it was a high number of people in a short amount of time. And the thing that amazes me is that they don't want to spend that expense, which I can kind of understand. However, when a person actually jumps from that bridge and you have to call out the helicopter, and you have to call out the Coast Guard, and you have to call the FHP, and you have to back that traffic up for how long? What is that costing you? I mean, really, have they figured out that versus what it would cost to patrol that area?
The Florida Highway Patrol's function on the Skyway Bridge, we do a suicide prevention watch. 24 hours a day we have a trooper out here that will patrol the bridge. They'll get calls for service. If someone's on top of the bridge, they'll be able to show up, respond, and potentially talk these individuals down. The success rate, I mean, we're over 25% of these people are being talked down by these troopers. They're extremely successful. They go through crisis management training in order to speak to the individuals, and we get them the help that they may need. That encounter with that trooper may be the little bit of help they need to not do what they're getting ready to do. When we first receive a call on a vehicle on a Skyway, what we'll do is we'll dispatch the trooper that's on the Skyway detail from that day. Shift commander will be notified. We'll go to that vehicle. We'll run the tag. We'll make sure we'll find out who the owner is and to find out who the driver is. Because sometimes people do break down on the Skyway, they leave their vehicles there. So one, what we want to do is contact the owner, find out if they know where their vehicle's at. Then we want to make sure that we locate the person that belongs to that vehicle. If in the case that someone did jump off the bridge or they were taken off, we'll be able to notify the Coast Guard and other authorities to assist us in locating that individual. Of course, when we find that abandoned vehicle, if we cannot find we can't find an owner, we don't see anybody on the bridge, the vehicle doesn't come back stolen, we have to go through the steps. We definitely don't want to wait too long, because potentially if we wait, that person could, if they did jump over the bridge, they could be alive. So we'll notify the proper authorities immediately, and then we'd rather be safe than sorry. The Coast Guard, the fire station, they will be deployed. We've had incidences in the past where they have been deployed and it wasn't a jumper. Someone just left their car up there.
Normally what happens is we get a report from DOT. The cameras, they'll see a car on top of the bridge, or even more likely is that now with cell phones that someone will call us and say, a car stopped on top of the bridge, and most people know that's immediately suspicious because there's not really any place for people to stop up there. It's not encouraged at all, and so we normally get a call. A lot of times it'll be routed to us and the Florida Highway Patrol. They generally have a trooper assigned to the center span of the bridge. The center span, of course, is in Hillsborough County. It's kind of just a bit of an oddity, but it requires us to either travel down towards Bradenton, Florida, or travel over to St. Petersburg to get to the center span, which is in the middle of the shipping channel. And so we usually have a delayed response getting there. So sometimes there'll be another agency there before us, sometimes not. But we dispatch a deputy sheriff up there, and of course then we have to determine, is it northbound or southbound, which sometimes can even give a even longer delay.
Todd and I were married in 1999, and in March of 2009 we had just celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary. On January 16th, 2010, Todd received his 3rd-degree black belt in Taekwondo. His mom actually flew in to see him, and this was up in Chicago, and it was really cold. That same day was the same day that he'd gotten the offer of the job to be able to start down here February 1st. So he started his job down here February 1st at a great company in Sarasota, using all of his technology skills that he had been using. And I don't know what happened. 6 weeks later, in the middle of the night, he gets up from his bed, leaves the remote controls on the dining room table, and drives the car to the bridge, parks the car at the top of the bridge, and jumps to his death.
I think there's a few reasons why the bridge draws so much attention from people wanting to kill themselves. For one, they feel that they're alone anyway, and at the top of that bridge, it's a rather lonely spot when you stand out there by yourself and look over the edge of it. And you can commit suicide and really not have involved anybody else, and from a sad standpoint, you're not messing up anything in your house. There's not a lot of blood in their view. People view it as a cleaner way to commit suicide, although if you see what happens to people when they fall that far and hit that water, it's not a pretty sight to see, and it's not a painless way to die, and I think it's over-glorified. I believe certain people think that they're going to pass out before they impact the water, which is not the case. We used to take new negotiators down there and have them stand up there because some of them were scared to death to be on top of that bridge. And when you take a rock or something and throw it off that, and you see how many seconds it takes to impact that water, it gives you a chilling realization of how big that and how high up you are and how long it's going to take for someone to die.
So, you know, what can you do? What should you do if you think someone is thinking about or is at risk of suicide? Talk about it. Ask them. It's that simple. You're not, in talking about it and asking them, are you thinking about killing yourself? You're not putting that idea in their heads. In fact, you're probably giving them a relief because they've been holding this stuff in. And as we know, suicide carries a bit of a stigma, even in today's society. And so people are embarrassed, afraid, angry, you name it, a myriad of feelings about it. So the best thing you can do if you suspect that someone's at risk is just ask them.
They're trying to get maybe, you know, someone to feel sorry for them, and it's just not so. People are pissed off, not sorry. You know what I'm saying? Pissed off because...
What it seems like.
I mean, whatever you cost that, you know, that you want to jump, and you want to jump because you might, you know, want to have your problem solved. Well, the problem is not solved. Maybe solved for you, but not solved for the other person, you know? And even if when you jump and you're thinking that you can get the other person to love you because you're, you know, giving up your life, well, that's not true. You know what I mean? If you're trying to hurt yourself to prove somebody that you love that person, well, it gives a different impression. You know what I'm saying? They want to stay away from you. You know what I mean? It just, no good comes out of it.
We know suicide's difficult to talk about, but sometimes people are feeling so bad that they actually say, I wish I wasn't around anymore, I don't want to be here, life is too hard. And again, we can ask them if they're suicidal, and if someone says, yes, I have been, then it's okay to talk with them about what's brought you to this point, what are the things that are problems for you, what are the things that are causing you not to want to go on. Those are all ways to be a good listener. You don't have to solve their problems, but by letting them organize their thoughts and get their problems off of their mind, it eases some of the stress they're under. And then any of those questions and comments and conversation can be followed up with information about helplines that you can give to others, such as the national helpline 1-800-273-TALK. And that'll connect someone anywhere in the country with a professional counselor.
I don't sleep. It's been a year. I still don't sleep. If I sleep 2 hours at a crack, that's a lot. Social Security has decided I'm disabled because I can't handle stress. I don't cook. I've lost 35 pounds. And all of his emotional baggage he dumped on me. So all the stuff that he was worried about, now I carry it. Even though I don't want to. I carry it instead. Will I ever get well? My hope is to get better. I'll never be who I was before. And now I get to make myself into somebody different, even though I didn't want to. I don't feel that suicide is any more or less of a selfish act than anything else anybody does to themselves. I think that by the time a person decides that they're going to commit suicide, they're in such emotional pain. How can you make a person stay in such pain? I do believe that there's a whole period up to the point in which you can commit suicide where you can talk to anybody. It doesn't have to be me, it could be anybody. And that's the selfish part, when you keep it inside and don't want to try to get better. I think that we as a people need to acknowledge suicide as a type of death, and I believe it's nonsense to say oh, well, so-and-so died from suicide. We can't put that on the air because somebody else might die from suicide. If that worked, why don't we try it for murder? We won't broadcast murder anymore and see if that will stop murder. But to hear we won't broadcast suicide because there'll be another suicide, folly, nonsense. When I went to the funeral home, I'm sitting there, and they come and they bring me a big red hazmat bag. Actually, the fact that they call his body hazmat waste is really upsetting. And they bring me this orange bag, and I look inside this orange bag, and inside this bag are the clothes that he was wearing when he died. They had returned them to me. So like a good wife, they were smelly. I took them home and I washed them and I dried them and I folded them up because I don't know what to do with them. What do you do with them now? I can't throw them away. I don't know what the right thing to do with them is, but I still have them. They're very powerful because they show you what happens to you when you hit the water from that distance.
You know, you look off of that Skyway and it's beautiful. It's beautiful, especially on, you know, a calm day when the water's nice and calm and the sun is shining. I mean, it's beautiful out there, but I don't think I would have ever known what jumping off a Skyway would do to you, or jumping off any bridge for that fact, if my brother wouldn't have done it. And I became obsessed with finding out things that I really probably shouldn't be finding out. It's a horrible death. It is really a horrible death. They say off of the Skyway, I'm not sure about other bridges, but off the Skyway, I believe it takes you 3.2 seconds or 3.7 seconds, something like that. And you hit that water going 125, maybe faster. I can't remember. But you hit that water like you're hitting concrete. I mean, it rips your organs apart. It breaks your bones. I mean, it's not a peaceful death. It is not peaceful. There's nothing peaceful about it. I don't know. Anyone thinking about committing suicide in any fashion, I think, should really think twice. You leave behind a lot of people. You devastate a lot of lives. And the funny thing about it is, the one person that you want to devastate isn't usually devastated by it.
Well, let me quickly bring about the very core of the romanticism of the Skyway Bridge. Last time you were down at the beach, you enjoyed it, didn't you? As a matter of fact, you stood there and you felt so small. Wow, how beautiful. Would only be natural to want to go choose a beautiful place to die now, wouldn't it? It's beautiful when you're standing up there. It honestly is. When you jump, you go down so quickly. It's just incredible what you feel. But when you hit that water, there's nothing romantic about that. Do you know normally it rips people open from the inside? Is there something romantic about me tying you to one leg to a tree and the other one to the back of a pickup truck and driving off? Is that romantic? People get ripped to pieces when they hit that water, and you're alive. You feel it. You feel every bone breaking. I had to swim out of there with a broken neck, a collapsed lung. As I tried to get out of the water, when sanity had returned, how bad I wanted to live. I was willing to swim. I was willing to do anything to stay alive. Swimming in pain over these waves to where I couldn't see the other side. And I finally could. I could see the rocks over there. All I could think was I was going to make it on them rocks. As I got closer to the rocks, the waves slammed me into the rocks. I could feel every pain, everything broken, everything shaken. You know, pain beyond tears, pain that people don't understand pain. You know, and it was all at the core of what's going on in the mind being misdirected, you know, losing sight. Now, the romanticism of the bridge is an illusion.
The Hillsborough County Medical Examiner office moved to this facility about 4 years ago. It's a state-of-the-art complex consisting of toxicology lab, autopsy suite, and administration building. Currently, we perform about 13 to 1,400 autopsies in a year, investigating about 10% of all deaths in area of our district. And we are prepared to handle just about anything that might happen, including mass disasters. Medical examiners are doctors appointed. Chief medical examiner is appointed by governor. The associate medical examiners by chief medical examiners. They investigate deaths in the district areas according to Florida statute that requires investigation of all the unnatural deaths. And this is basically what we do. We investigate deaths in the area of Hillsborough County, and we render opinions regarding the cause and manner of death. The cause of death is injury or disease that initiate a chain of events ending in someone's death. And manner of death is statistical classification into one of 5 categories. It's a pseudo-judicial division into homicidal, suicidal, accidental, natural, and undetermined deaths. Most of people that jump from the bridge die due to blunt impact injuries. We almost never see drownings. The kinetic energy that is caused by the velocity of body in free fall from 200 feet height or so creates tremendous force. You can measure it in tons, I would think. And what we observe usually in these cases is multiple blunt impact type injuries. Fractures of ribs, fractures of other bones, fractures of spine, lacerations of internal organs like liver, spleen, lungs, heart, injuries to the central nervous system, neck injuries. That's what we typically observe in these deaths.
We're typically dispatched.
And we do run, the Coast Guard also gets involved, especially if there's a search that we have to do too. I mean, sometimes they call it in and ask us to come out and help. Sometimes we, when we get it, we obviously call them as well. We work good with the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard comes out, we'll set patterns, and we do our search patterns out here. And sometimes it could take 2, 3, 4, 5 hours to locate the body. It depends on how it is. I mean, nobody realizes when you're down here on the water level how much you cannot see. And if a body is just floating underneath the surface of the water, that's all you see. It's usually you have to be on top of it. It's got to be within a couple yards, and then you can see it. Usually, very rarely do we see a body far out. So that's why sometimes, depending on the tide, the wind, the currents, and everything, it could take us up to 5-6 hours to find somebody.
And then, like we said before, a lot of times we'll call the search off. I mean, after
so many
a certain
hours.
amount of time, it's just it's just not going to happen.
Yes, we just call
especially
it.
Especially at night, bad weather.
Maybe somebody will spot the body, or it'll come up, or whatever. But there is that time frame where we just cut it off.
What happens is we'll bring the body back to a marina that's on the southern end of the county, Pinellas County. And at that point, we'll transfer the body up onto that seawall at that marina. And we'll typically check available. to get the boat back in service. However, Hillsborough County needs to send their representative out, which could take anywhere from an hour or 2 hours, just depending. You know, the numbers seems to be getting more. It seems like at least once a month now we're going out. Before you'd probably have maybe 7, 8 a year. Now it's once a month, sometimes twice a month.
Sometimes twice, yeah.
You know, that's unfortunate.
Then we, you know, our procedures, we got, we keep them hooked in. We got the body bags, and you know, we take this door out. You know, the door comes out, and we, you know, just slide the bodies on deck into the bag, zip them up, and you know, as best we can, and take them over to the marina that we go to, where we usually meet the sheriff's department, and then they take over with the ME from there. So when we have a body on board and we're coming in, this is where we come. We have our units come over and meet us that are on scene, and then the Hillsborough County Sheriffs, if they are not on scene, which usually they're not, sometimes they are, we have them come here to O'Neill's, and this is where we, you know, bring in the bodies. Right here, where the concrete is and the pilings, that's where we offload. So we just pull up. We usually have some help trying to get them off. Like I said before, sometimes you know, they're like a sack of potatoes, a big bag of potatoes. You know, there's no rigidity at all. So a lot of times we'll have to actually get a backboard out, put the backboard down, put the body on a backboard, and then pull it up, because it's just, the bags just rip and they're just not stable, and you know, the bodies are in such bad condition.
And there's the birds waiting for the parts.
Yeah, there's the birds waiting for us. But this is where we bring them, right here. They're dropped here. And you know, sometimes hours upon hours in the hot sun.
Tonight, detectives are working around the clock to try and figure out exactly what happened. Here's 10 Connects reporter Tammy Fields.
This Florida Highway Patrol trooper, the first to respond. Sergeant Ray Ada got the call around 3:45 Monday afternoon. A man here on the top of the Skyway Bridge, and black smoke pouring from a car that was on fire nearby. Just as Sergeant Ada was getting out of his patrol car to check on the man, he says he jumped some 200 feet. Jamie Foster was here at the North End Skyway Fishing Pier and spoke with us by phone about what she saw next.
A boat came up, and there were 3 fishermen in the boat, and the guy was shouting, "Does anybody know CPR? Does anyone know CPR?"
Foster talked the men through it. They believed he was still breathing. She took off her shoes and was about to dive in the water, but it appeared to be too late.
He had on no shirt, he had on maybe denim shorts, and he had on socks and shoes. And he looked very pale.
The man did not survive. Meanwhile, back on top of the bridge, firefighters put out that car fire only to make a grisly discovery, a body in the trunk.
No windows in it at all, and just burnt like a piece of charcoal. It was barely recognizable that it was a car.
Terry Kirk, a retired truck driver, was heading home to Clearwater with his family in tow. He says after traveling the roadways across the country for years, he has never seen anything like this.
Never in my history of driving and seeing hundreds of burned out vehicles have I seen a vehicle burned out to the extent that that vehicle was burned out.
Still no word tonight, folks, on the identities of those involved in this and what their relationship to each other might be. Traffic, though, is back to normal along the Skyway Bridge. Reg?
If you are concerned about keeping someone safe after they've shared that they are having suicidal thoughts, one of the things that you can do is make certain that if there are means available to try and help restrict access to those means, whether it's pills or guns or time alone to harm themselves. So giving a gift of your presence or letting them know or connecting them with other supports in the community as you're getting them to seek additional help for whatever's going on in their life that is so unbearable, intolerable, that they don't want to see another tomorrow. So try and remove the means, be there for the individual, and offer some support in addition to your presence.
Part of what had such a great impact on me developed as I researched the problem of suicide here in our county. And as I looked through all the coroner's reports and the data, what I discovered was that there was a large number of these cases that were in a single zip code, larger than any other. And yet that zip code was unfamiliar to me. And I looked on maps and couldn't find it. And it wasn't until later I talked to the Highway Patrol folks who informed me that that zip code was actually the center span of the Skyway Bridge. And that, in fact, that is a part of Hillsborough County, and that's where those fatalities were all noted. So when someone goes up to the top of the Sunshine Skyway Bridge with the plan of ending their life, they will on occasion pick up the phone that's in the emergency call boxes, and they'll make that call, and that call comes directly to the Crisis Center at Tampa Bay. And one of our specially trained counselors will pick up that phone and talk to them. To the best of my knowledge, never ever has someone followed through on their plan to take their own life once we've engaged them in that conversation. And it's the same point that we try to make with anyone else, is if you know how to make that conversation a meaningful one, you can save a life.
It's the only one around. It's just like the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. It's here, it's tall, it's big, and it's famous. You know, there's other gourd bridges. There's ones in other parts of the world. There's ones in Japan. There's places all over the world that people typically go to commit suicide because people know that they will be successful there.
In that moment, I would, I'd love to encourage everybody to go over to Busch Gardens and ride Shikra, because that's exactly what it feels like. Totally to the hill. That just taking your breath away. Yeah, I just wanted to live. I was like, oh my God, what have I done? You snap out of it, man. You're happy then for a moment. The real sad part about jumping off of the Skyway Bridge, there's so many people, I'm sure, on the way down would have chose to swim out, And I'm just incredibly fortunate to have a second chance, and I'd like this second chance to mean something to somebody else. It certainly means something to me. Yes, it's true. It's a miracle that I'm alive. Looking at my son Jet, I think of greater miracles and generations yet to come. See, my son Jet would have never been born had I have not survived the Skyway jump. How many generations could be lost in this? As I'm now a grandfather, I look at my youngest son and I think, my goodness, he's going to be a father, and he's going to be a grandfather. Perhaps untold generations could be saved. Maybe your life is a little more important than you ever thought it was. Certainly mine was. It's clear to say that I'm alive for some reason. The beauty of it is I know that reason. You're not an accident. It's been millions of years just to get to this point. How many generations lay out there in front of you? As somehow we're all part of it. We're part of all of this time. This is our time to live.
We need to look at the safety net, because when the safety net erodes, people's options begin to diminish. And when your options diminish, that bridge begins to look awfully good. And I think the bridge is really iconic for that reason. I've looked at the Skyway Bridge, I've looked at the Golden Gate Bridge, and I've wondered about what is it about the bridge. It's not just any way, it's the bridge. It is about throwing yourself off of something into nothingness. What does that really mean? And truthfully,
in all of that thinking, I really believe that a piece of it has to do with feeling like you don't count. And so you're driven to a place where you have to do something big because it's the last thing you'll ever do. And who hasn't felt insignificant? Who hasn't felt trapped? Who hasn't felt like there was nowhere to turn, or that maybe things would be better if they weren't around? Those are fundamental human emotions, but yet our society's made a taboo out of it. What's that about?
The pain that I feel now is the pain that he was feeling, maybe even more, because he was about to lose everything he knew, you know. And I know that part of suicide is that you blame that person, you hate that person, you're angry with that person. And I'm not angry with my brother because my brother tried to get help. I think we all failed my brother. I think society failed my brother. And people need to be more aware about suicide. People need to know that it's real. If somebody says it, they're going to do it.
If I could have one last conversation with Tim, it wouldn't be much different than the last conversation I had with him. Because the last words I said to my son was, "I love you. I'll see you tomorrow." He said, "Love you, Mom. I'll see you tomorrow." And I'm waiting for that tomorrow till the day I die. What would I ask him? I would ask him, what more could have been done to help you? What was I not able to provide for you? What difference could we have made to have stopped what occurred? How could I have reached out anymore? What did I miss? What could I have done different? Because it's not about love. That's what people really need to understand when their loved ones die by suicide. It's just not about the fact that they didn't love you. And sometimes when I hear songs about love is all there is, that's just a crock of shit to me. Because it isn't. Mental health, that's where it's at. It's what's going on in between your ears. And people who look happy aren't necessarily all that happy. And kids are great chameleons. We all have learned to be chameleons in life. But I think the one thing that I know that my son knows is that I love him, and that I honor him. And if there's any way we could have stopped this, I would have gave my life for it. And that's why I do what I do, is because I don't want anybody else to have to feel like I feel every day. It's been 8 years. And that first 5 were pretty difficult. The first 5 or 6 were the most difficult years in my entire life, living through this. And I'll be living through it till the day I die. Sometimes I still have my bad days.
The bridge made it far too easy.
After I jumped, the impact, naturally, tore my clothes off. I broke my neck, the C7, and broke my ribs on both sides, collapsed my lung, burst my spleen, and you just pretty beat up. It's an impact. I mean, you go up there, that's the thing, if anybody realized before they jumped how much it was going to hurt, they wouldn't jump.
Our crisis hotline workers sit in a room looking out at the Skyway Bridge as if being constantly reminded of what the potential for human despair is. There's not a minute that any of them are on the phones that they don't see what that potential is. And when you look at that bridge every single day, it's very easy to think about what it would be like to see your life as so meaningless, as so painful, that climbing up to the top and throwing yourself off would feel like a release. It makes me really sad, but I understand it. And I wonder if maybe more people than not understand it, and that's why it's so iconic.
Hundreds of people have lost their lives on the Skyway Bridge due to suicide. If you are experiencing suicidal thoughts right now, please contact someone. And if you find yourself on the Skyway Bridge, please use the phones. You need to talk with somebody right now. It's going to be okay. It doesn't mean you're crazy. It just means maybe you're a bit overwhelmed with life at this moment.
Because when the safety net erodes, people's options begin to diminish. And when your options diminish, that bridge begins to look awfully good.